This is Fuzzy Road to Health, and I'm Fuzzy D. Today we're going to be debunking some carnivore myths. Let's get started. The first myth that you hear about, both from general public, but medical professionals as well, is eating meat will cause cancer or heart disease. Now, this is simply not true. I can't put it any simpler than that. The original reason that people believe that is back in I think it was the late 50s, a doctor by the name of Ansel Keys did a study. And this study that he came out with showed that there was a link between red meat and fat for heart disease. Now, the problem with the research that he did is he went out and there were like 23 countries that had enough data available to use for this study. He cherry-picked only 7 and completely ignored other factors such as smoking and other bad diets and environmental issues. Completely ignored that as contributing to the numbers. And he completely ignored any countries that had data that disagreed with the theory he was trying to prove. And he trotted that out to the government and was a very good propagandist and publicist. The government adopted it, accepted it, and it became the conventional wisdom. But if you actually look at the science behind it, it's completely flawed. And there are lots of studies that have come out recently that completely disprove it. So I'm just going to show you some really quickly. I'm not going to really get into them. I've got another video where I've done that called is High LDL Cholesterol Deadly? You can check out that video if you want more detail, and there'll also be links in that video to take you to this research. But I'll just show you real quickly here. So we've got this study. Now, these are all peer-reviewed science articles, by the way. So we've got statin therapy is not warranted for a person with high LDL cholesterol when he's on a low carbohydrate diet. Now, there's a reason for that I'm going to get into in a bit. And another one, dietary recommendations for familial hypercholesterolemia. I have trouble with that word. An evidence-free zone. And here's another one from the National Library of Medicine. Low carbohydrate diet. Are concerns with saturated fats, lipids, and cardiovascular disease risk justified? The short answer is no, they're not. And this article proves it. Here we've got another one. And we've got another one here. So here's 5 studies that are scientifically vetted. In every one of these studies, one of the main people in the study is actually a PhD scientist called Dr. David Diamond. He's got some incredible information out there. So the thing to remember when you see studies that show that there is a link, you have to look at who funded those studies. So something that's kind of been coming out in the last couple of years is that in the peer review process, they've actually found some corruption where some of these scientists that are on the board for doing peer reviews are actually being funded by some of these large other concerns, giant food companies and pharmaceutical companies and even medical establishment. You have to keep in mind that they've got a vested interest in keeping things the way they are because they're very, very profitable. There's multiple billions of dollars involved in each one of those areas, and they're going to protect it with everything they've got. So they fund a lot of these studies. And if a study goes completely against the narrative that they want, they just bury the study. They paid for it, so they can do that. And other times, because of the money involved, the scientists will just give them the results that they want, and then they publish it as an official study. And it's really unfortunate, and it makes it difficult to tell what the truth is. So you just need to take a look at where did they get the money from this study? Who funded it? Is it coming from a university that gets a lot of funding from these places? So that's just something that is the reality that you have to deal with when you're trying to do this research. There are literally tens of thousands of us on the carnivore diet that are being healed of all of these issues that we're talking about, all of these chronic diseases and autoimmune diseases, mental health issues, heart disease, diabetes, all kinds of things. Now, one or two of us doing it, even a couple hundred people, could be considered anecdotal. But when you've got tens of thousands of us, I don't know how you can deny the efficacy of this way of eating. It doesn't make any sense to claim that it doesn't work and that there's all these dangers involved. If it was so dangerous, thousands of us would be dying from this, but we're not. We're getting healthier. We're reclaiming our lives. So let's talk a little bit more about LDL cholesterol. As a carnivore, you're going to have much higher LDL cholesterol, way above what's considered acceptable by, modern medical science. The thing that most doctors don't realize, and if they would take the time to research it, which most won't. Don't know why they won't, but most won't. But what they've discovered is that high LDL cholesterol is only dangerous when you're eating the standard American diet, when you're eating all of these processed foods and sugars and seed oils, and you're not getting enough meat and fat in your diet. It actually alters the structure of the LDL cholesterol molecule. Now, when it's operating properly, it's actually protective. It protects your arteries in your heart from anything building up and getting plaque thickening in there. It actually prevents that from happening. If you've got it built up and you switch to carnivore and you turn the LDL cholesterol molecule back to what it should be, it'll help to get rid of that. It'll help clean it out. But your brain also requires cholesterol to function properly. Your nervous system requires it. Virtually every part of the body requires it. At the center of every cell is the mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria in the body, its entire job is to seek out and destroy or repair cells. So if it finds a cell that's mutated, that, like a cancer cell or something, it's going to destroy it and replace it with a healthy cell. If it finds a damaged cell, it's going to repair it. Now, that's when it's functioning normally. But if you're eating the sugars and the carbs and all these other foods on the standard American diet, it can no longer do that. It can't provide the proper nutrition, for lack of a better word, to the mitochondria. And the mitochondria becomes damaged and ineffective. And that's why these chronic diseases are able to take hold. That's why cancer can take hold. That's why autoimmune disease happens, because the mitochondria is being damaged and it can no longer do its job and heal the body. And this also, by the way, is something that affects aging. Up until recently, scientists thought that telomeres, which is basically what controls your aging, when the telomeres get short enough, your cells can no longer be rebuilt properly and you die. The going theory was that when your telomeres shorten, they can't get longer again. Like, you can't repair a telomere. Well, it turns out that the carnivore diet does lengthen your telomeres and extends your life. You on other videos, or maybe in this video, depending on which version you're seeing, you'll hear me talk about how it's really improved my vision and healing some other stuff that's supposed to be unhealable. And of course, driven all my autoimmune stuff into remission. But there's people that are experiencing hair regrowth. If the hair follicles were completely dead, they're not coming back. But a lot of people they were just kind of recently lost their hair. A lot of times their hair comes back on carnivore, and a lot of times their hair will darken up again if you had a lot of gray hair. Now, it's been too soon for that to happen with me. I've still got pretty white and gray hair. I'm hoping maybe that'll change. But the one thing I have noticed is I was losing hair at a pretty significant rate before I started carnivore. When I would take a shower, there'd be lots of hair laying on the bottom of the shower. Or I'd run my hands through my hair and I would get bunches of hair in my fingers. And that doesn't happen anymore. The damage that these foods are doing to the LDL cholesterol molecule, basically it shrinks the size of the molecule. It makes it heavier. And because it gets shrunk, the little openings and pores and crevices in the veins and arteries, it can get stuck in there and start building up, and that's where you start getting the fatty buildup and the plaque and stuff in your arteries. But when your cholesterol is formed properly, when that LDL molecule is formed correctly, it's larger, it's lighter, it's fluffier, and it can't get caught in those places anymore, and it will actually help to clean out anything that is there. It'll take some time. It also provides the proper clean nutrients that your mitochondria needs to work properly. So if you want even more detail on this, make sure you check out that video I mentioned. I'll put it in a card somewhere up here and a link down in the description. So the next myth is the carnivore diet is too expensive. Well, the truth of it is, my wife thought the same thing. She was very against me starting this diet. She didn't understand it. She hadn't seen the research that I had seen, and she really didn't want me doing this. But once I jumped into it, a number of things happened to save us money. The first thing is about 2 weeks in, I no longer needed to take vitamins. I was spending about $100, $150 a month on vitamins and supplements. I was also at the time using cannabis for pain, and so I was spending, depending on the month, anywhere between $150 to $300 a month on cannabis. All that went away. So that was a big savings right there. And the other thing that people don't realize with carnivore is when you're carnivore, you're not buying anything else. You're not buying sauces, you're not buying salad dressings, you're not buying condiments, you're not buying seasonings. So there's all these other things that people normally buy that cost a fair amount of money that we're not buying anymore. We're just buying meat. Now, if you go out and you're eating nothing but ribeye steaks or porterhouse, that kind of thing, yeah, it's expensive. But you don't need to do that to be carnivore. There's eggs, of course, which you can eat. There's cheaper cuts of meat. There's ground beef. There's, like sirloin tip steak and round roast and chuck roast and brisket, things like that. Now, they take a little more prep work. I got myself a sous vide machine, and that makes a huge difference. You can make almost any cut of meat tender with that if you cook it right. There's also slow roasters or slow cookers. There's pressure cookers. There's Instapots. These are all tools that you can use that, they cost you a little money up front, but they're going to save you a lot of money in the long run. Also, for the convenience factor, an air fryer is really good. So if you have, decent cuts of meat, you can cook them in a hurry in an air fryer, and it does a wonderful job. Some of these things I'll leave links for down in the description. I also cure my own bacon. So because of doing that and wanting to be able to slice it, I went out and got like a kind of a commercial style meat slicer. And it's a wonderful tool. I don't use it that often, but when I do use it, it's very, very handy. And you can also use it, if you pick up like a chuck roast, you can use it to cut some nice thin steaks that you can then use a tenderizer tool on. I've got one that's got a bunch of little needles or thin blades in it that you can use to tenderize the meat, and it works better when it's thinner like that. And then you can do a fast fry in a pan, or you can do them in an air fryer. That's all ways that you can save a ton of money. Now, one of the other things we did to save money is I bought a pig fresh from a farmer. It was actually a local Hutterite colony. A group of us went in and bought a whole bunch all at once, so we got a really good deal. So by the time we paid for wrapping paper and tape and Ziploc bags and all that kind of stuff, I wound up paying about $1.75 a pound on average for this pork, and we were able to fill a freezer. We actually took our tax return and bought a new upright freezer to hold the pig. So that's been really nice. And we've got another smaller chest freezer as well. Some other things you can do to save money is if you do want some of those nice steaks, don't go out and buy a package of 2 or 3 ribeye or or New York strip or sirloin strip, which is the same thing as in New York. Don't go buy those steaks individually. They cost a fortune. But if you go and buy an entire roast, right, like a bone-in standing rib roast, right, buy the whole thing. It's called a primal cut. So you find a butcher that has those, and you buy that whole thing, and then you cut it up yourself. Now, if you buy a standing rib roast, you can cut a slab of nice ribs out of it. Plus, you can then cut nice 1.25 inch, 1.5 thick steaks, and you can get like 9 to 12 of them out of there, and you'll pay about half the price for those steaks as you would for going out and buying small packages. Plus, you get the ribs on top of it. You can also buy a sirloin primal or New York primal, which is where you get your sirloin strip or your New York strip steaks from. These are things you can do to save a ton of money, and we've found that we actually spend a lot less on groceries now than we used to before starting carnivore. Now, my wife's not fully carnivore yet, but she's close. She's basically a strict keto. She tries to hold herself to 30 to 50 carbs a day, and the rest is meat. Now, she does eat a tiny bit of vegetables and fruit and berries and stuff, but she's getting there. Eventually, we'll both be full carnivore. She's had to transition slowly because she had her gallbladder removed. And yes, you can be carnivore if you've had your gallbladder removed, because your gallbladder is only a storage device. It's not actually producing any of the bile. It's your liver that produces that. And as you slowly increase your need for it, your liver will compensate and create more and more. So that's just kind of the way it works. So the next myth is we need fiber. And actually we don't. Despite what nutritionists try and tell us, if you actually look at the science, we don't need fiber. Fiber actually isn't that good for us. We can't digest it, right? The only time that people kind of need fiber is if they're eating all this standard American diet. It helps kind of scrape stuff out. But if you're eating a animal product only diet, you definitely don't need fiber. You can't digest it, and it can actually aggravate a lot of problems with the gut that many people have. Now, when you're fully carnivore, it's natural to only poop once every 2 or 3 days, unless you're having some diarrhea. If I eat too much fat even today, I'll still get diarrhea. But when I'm not eating too much fat, it's usually every couple of days, and I'll have just a little bit smaller than a normal poop. And the reason for that is that meat and fat is so nutrient dense that most of it gets absorbed. There's very little waste. But when you're eating a standard American diet, just about everything you're eating is waste. And that's why you're pooping, a couple times a day and in large volumes. I used to go 3 times a day when I was eating the standard American diet. So that's just kind of how that is. Now, the next myth is our bodies need sugar. Well, yes, parts of our body require sugar, but that sugar is produced or can be produced by the liver. You don't need external sources of sugar. You just don't. Your liver can produce all the sugar you need. So if you're on a meat only diet, your body will take some of that excess energy that it's processing from the meat, and the liver will turn it into the sugar that your body needs. Now, your brain uses glucose, your nerves use glucose. A few areas of your body do use glucose, but your body can produce all you need from your liver just from eating meat. You don't need external sources. Now, there's all kinds of issues that eating sugar can cause. A small amount of sugar from time to time probably isn't going to hurt anyone. When you're eating it on a constant basis, like it is done in the standard American diet, it stresses the pancreas, stresses your immune system, causes inflammation, and it will cause insulin resistance after a while. And this is why people get diabetes and why their pancreas gets destroyed. Type 2 diabetes can be completely reversed by a carnivore diet. But even type 1 diabetes, you can reduce the need for insulin 50 to 70% on average, even for people with really severe cases of type 1 diabetes. they'll stay a lot more level. You know, they won't have these constant ups and downs that they're normally dealing with. So it's just amazing how you can affect things like diabetes, even if you've got a really serious version of it. So meat and fat are actually the most powerful medicines that you can consume. They heal all parts of your body at once. They provide the proper energy that you need in the proper amounts. They don't try and address just one thing at a time. You know, you go to a doctor, they give you a prescription, and that's designed and focused to one set of symptoms. You know, they're dealing with one thing at a time, and the body just doesn't work that way. You have to deal with the whole body all at once. You got to deal with all the systems together. You need to deal with the underlying cause. So if you deal with the underlying cause and cure it, heal it, then the symptoms go away. But if you're only dealing with the symptoms, the underlying cause is still there. That's why 90% of the time, medications just don't work, especially in the long term. Now, let me be clear about something. Carnivore will not cure autoimmune disease, and a lot of other diseases it won't cure either. So when you hear people talk about the carnivore cure, you need to understand that it's not really a cure per se, because if you go off the diet, it'll come back. However, as long as you stay on the diet, you'll be in complete remission. And I found that in my case to be true. If I eat a food I'm not supposed to, my arthritis flares and I'm in pain within an hour. And sometimes it'll last for days depending on what it was that I ate. So just something to be aware of. Carnivore puts you in remission. It doesn't cure you. Well, if you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're sure to catch our next videos coming out. We appreciate you being here today. We always enjoy having you. We'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.